Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Leon Vainstein speaking from Los Angeles, California. The Trump-Zelensky-Putin meeting. The sensation of the hour is Peskov's statement about Putin's readiness to meet with Trump and Zelensky for direct negotiations. At the same time, Peskov said that this meeting needs to be thoroughly prepared. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about China's shaky position and why Russia's hope for China's protection might turn out to be a false hope or just a dream. Well, of course, let's also recall the effect of tariffs on the economy of the United States of America. And for now, yes, there will be more to come. Absolutely, of course, the cherry on top at the end. And thank you, by the way, for writing such nice comments. I'm trying to live up to it. I'm often asked if Trump can just say, "That's enough. Do you want to keep killing each other? Keep killing, I'm leaving." Let's see if he can, even though he's said more than once that he'll deal with this problem. If he can just throw up his hands and say, "Live as you want or die as you want." Here's what General Kellogg, appointed as President Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, says.
I think he's irritated that he made a perfectly reasonable proposal and led a constructive discussion, but in response he was met with such irrationality that it really drives me crazy. It irritates me too, because seriously guys, you have an opportunity right now that you might not have again. And if you keep refusing it, you'll probably miss one of the last good chances to try to stop or finish this matter. And it really irritates him.
A missing document is causing chaos. Trump asked Putin to provide a written proposal, but as Kellogg confirms, this Russian memorandum never arrived, and Ukraine is threatening to skip the peace summit in Istanbul. On Monday,
President Putin said, "Well, I'll give you ours within a week." We call this a memorandum, and we haven't seen it yet. The Ukrainians haven't seen it. The Americans haven't seen it. So this only increases the disappointment when the president says, "Wait a minute, I asked for this, but I still haven't received it."
the delay is staggering. Kellogg says that the scale of losses on both sides has reached levels not seen since World War II.
Their total number on both sides, if you add the wounded and the dead, according to the most conservative estimates, is about 1.2 million. That's a staggering figure. I mean, this is a war on an industrial scale. And I'm just amazed that it's impossible to take advantage of this opportunity that has arisen and try to do something about it.
To end the war, the United States is offering real concessions. Kellogg confirms that America is ready to stop NATO expansion, even to guarantee that Ukraine will not join the alliance, which meets Russia's key demand.
We say, fine, we can stop NATO expansion up to your borders. This is a matter of their security, you understand? They are worried that the United States will end up right next to them, and you say, okay, we can live with that. This reflects a deep
shift in United States policy. For the first time, the Trump administration is publicly making it clear that NATO's doors are closed to Ukraine.
We have said this repeatedly. We have said that for us, the issue of Ukraine joining NATO is not on the agenda, and probably 4 NATO countries will veto this.
And the global situation has changed. It has changed. Kellogg says that, unlike during Trump's first term, now America is facing a united front of adversaries: Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea.
Because back then we had an independent Russia,
China.
we had an independent Iran, we had an independent North Korea. And now they're all together, they have joint agreements, and that's exactly what worries us the most.
The risks of escalation are growing. Kellogg confirms that North Korean forces are already in Ukraine and warns that under treaty obligations, Russia could be drawn into future conflicts on the Korean Peninsula.
Because the North Koreans are now fighting in Ukraine, and if the Chinese invade Taiwan or the North Koreans move south, suddenly the Russians will have an obligation to join the fight on the side of North Korea. So you could very well see Russian soldiers on the battlefield on the Korean peninsula. Do you really want to end up in such a situation? And I think nobody wants that.
Kellogg reveals that President Trump personally warned Putin, either comply or you lose America's support. And there is a red line.
If he thinks he's being used and that there's no hope for progress, he's basically saying, we're done with this.
We're finished. Europa?
Now it's your problem.
The rest is up to you. Considering that according to estimates, about 5,000 people die every week, the Istanbul peace talks are under threat of collapse. The next 72 hours could decide the future of this war. And will the United States remain at the negotiating table or leave for good?
This was the review. 827,000 subscribers. I think what Kellogg said pretty accurately sums up the White House's attitude toward the events in Eastern Europe. Both sides are unrealistic. Both sides are not ready to stop the military actions. Russia, which started this nightmare war, in which so many have already died. According to the Central American side, it's somewhere around 1.2 million people, and more than 10 million people have been displaced in Ukraine, some of them abroad, some within the country. But Russia believes that it is beneficial for it to continue. They see only positive outcomes at the end of the war, only positive developments in the continuation of the war. This is the seizure of part of Ukraine, more than they have now, or the seizure of all of Ukraine. And so far, they don't see any negative sides to the continued destruction of Ukraine. I don't think Trump will drop the issue of ending the war. He might just stop actively participating in the negotiations. But even if that's the case, slowly but inevitably, serious sanctions against Russia will begin. Like the Graham and Blumenthal bill about 500% customs duties on all countries that buy oil, gas, and uranium from Russia. It's not that easy to do. Just so you understand, gentlemen, the United States can't implement this law immediately. We need at least 2 or 3 months. That's probably very optimistic to sign trade agreements with the European Union, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, Australia, and India, and also with several other major partners. Possibly after that, the United States can adopt this law, which will require us to impose 500% tariffs. That is de facto, this is an embargo. Everyone understands that. Yes, on goods from China, which buys oil from Russia. This is the largest buyer of Russian oil. And to provide another buyer of Russian energy resources, India, with supplies from other sources. For instance, negotiate with Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, etc. This demands time, negotiations, logistics, and secrecy to prevent it from being exposed. And serious preparation, including, well, let's say restructuring, or rather, probably re-equipping some small oil refineries for a slightly different type of oil. And it also requires European countries to prepare for the transition to non-Russian gas. Azerbaijani, Israeli, or United States liquefied natural gas will likely be more expensive. But on the other hand, so to speak, without any, so to say, attached political conditions, then terminals need to be built in Europe. I think we built one in Poland for Germany, but I don't know if it's operating now or not. In general, this requires time, effort, and accordingly investment. But if all of this is paid out, then Russia will really fall to its knees, from which Putin supposedly raised it. By paid out, I mean financed, of course. Paid. That was the wrong word. Indian news agency Hindustan, thank you. Putin proposes a 3-day meeting with Trump and Zelensky. Vladimir Putin suggested a meeting with Trump and Zelensky where the three heads of state could discuss face-to-face the possibilities of ending the war. To be continued. Conversations. Does this mean that Russia wants something more than just a part of Ukraine, and that's why they want Trump to be present there? I don't mean territories, but participation in world politics, participation in the global scene. I don't mean territories, but participation in world politics and the economy. Maybe Russian intelligence reported about problems in China and that China is not the right choice for Russia. Putin, said Peskov, is ready to continue the Istanbul format, but with a more representative composition. Russia and Ukraine, according to the Kremlin, must provide memorandums about what they want, on what terms, and negotiations will be held based on them. Alexander Dubinsky, who is sitting in a Ukrainian prison, and possibly, by the way, also expressing the opinion of the former patron of Zelensky, the oligarch Benny Kolomoisky, who is also in prison, claims that Zelensky will resist any peace agreement.
And this trap is called the refusal of the memorandum, which Russia has not yet written about the ceasefire.
It is claimed that Zelensky, this green freak, rejected the Russian memorandum on the ceasefire without even reviewing it. Fearing that soldiers returning from the front might rise up against him, he repeats the warning about catastrophic losses in the war. Deputies also draw attention to the alleged abuse by the Security Service of Ukraine. Dubinsky states that 68-year-old activist Yelena Berezhnaya, convicted of treason, suffered a stroke in court after being tortured in a security service of Ukraine concentration camp.
The murder of Andrei Portnov shows that Europe cannot guarantee their safety. This is a direct signal to Zelensky's inner circle. Either you follow the memorandum or your life will end.
In exile, Dmytryk puts forward his clear peace plan to get rid of the green freak. Both deputies, accused of spreading Russian propaganda, insist that they are fighting for Ukraine's survival, urging their supporters to spread their call for peace. While war engulfs Ukraine, the defiance of Dmytryk and Dubinsky against the Zelensky regime resonates with some and threatens accusations of treason for others, casting a shadow over the country's struggle for its future.
Both people shown in the video are former members of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. They are accused of spreading Russian propaganda. Their followers say that they are fighting against the Zelensky regime, which has usurped power and now does not want to end the war, fearing exposure and the loss of that very power. The debate among Ukrainians about what kind of future awaits their country after the end of the hostilities is only just beginning. And Russia's main partner and support, China, is in freefall.
China's economic growth is facing challenges, reaching only 4.9% in the third quarter.
Evergrande, the world's most indebted developer, is slowly collapsing in China.
It's a pity that 3 years ago I didn't know what I'm about to tell you now. Because while everyone was celebrating China's economic miracle, I was watching in real time as the biggest financial catastrophe in human history was unfolding. And what's most frightening is that it's about to affect your wallet, your job, and your future in ways you couldn't even imagine. This is the untold story of China's $53 trillion debt bomb, and why 2025 could be the year when everything changes.
That is, China, which used to be the lender giving out money at interest, overnight became a debtor. They have nothing to pay salaries to officials with. Government employees and pensioners are buying necessities on credit cards, maxing them out, and it's completely unclear how they will pay them back.
And this is the astonishing fact. China has constructed 80 million vacant apartments sufficient to house the entire population of the United Kingdom. All of this stands there, empty and falling into disrepair. The wastefulness is so immense that it's visible from space. Let me tell you about the moment when I realized just how deep this rabbit hole goes. Last year, I researched investing in China's infrastructure. You know, those shiny high-speed trains everyone talks about. What I discovered just shocked me. Those amazing high-speed trains. They lose 20 billion every year.
Every
Odinoki God. It's like building the most expensive amusement park in the world and then watching tumbleweeds roll down the empty corridors. Here's something propaganda won't tell you. Most of these rail lines are ghost routes. Imagine a $200 million train speeding through the Chinese countryside, and there might be only 12 passengers on board. Ticket sales revenue doesn't even cover the electricity bills, not to mention the trillions in construction debt. But wait, it gets even worse. Do you remember that terrible accident in 2011? Lightning struck the signaling system. 2 trains collided, 40 people died. What happened next fully reveals the essence of the Chinese approach to infrastructure. A house of cards, like a scene from a disaster movie when the hero realizes the supposedly indestructible building is made of paper and glue. But this isn't Hollywood, this is real life, and that building is the world's second largest economy. And now, let me amaze you with the situation in the real estate market. Imagine that they both went bankrupt on the same day. That's exactly what happened when the giants of the Chinese real estate market collapsed. One of them owed over $300 billion, surpassing the gross domestic product of most nations.
Since the Communist Party writes whatever it wants in the reports, that's what gets written. A lot of debts are simply not shown. They are so-called shadow debts.
China produces 28% of the world's industrial output. Your smartphone, your laptop, that electric car you're thinking about buying. The key components likely come from Chinese factories. When the debt crisis in China forces factories to shut down, your cost of living goes up. When Chinese banks stop lending, global supply chains freeze. When China stops buying Australian iron ore and Brazilian soybeans, commodity prices soar. And guess who pays for that? You do, at the grocery store, at the gas station, everywhere. I'm not trying to scare you, I want to prepare you. Because while politicians and mainstream media pretend this is just another economic cycle, smart money has already started to move. What I'm about to say will sound completely illogical. The debt crisis in China could actually turn out to be the best thing that has ever happened to the global economy. I know, it sounds crazy, but hear me out. This crisis is forcing companies to diversify their supply chains, reducing the long-standing dangerous dependence on China for almost everything. Vietnam, India, Mexico, even the United States are now receiving huge investments in manufacturing as companies rush to reduce their dependence on China. It's like ending a toxic relationship. It's painful initially, but ultimately freeing. Countries that have invested in developing their own manufacturing and alternative supply chains are about to see their strategy bear huge fruit. Let me present you with some numbers that will make your head spin. China's total debt amounts to $53 trillion, equating to $37,000 per Chinese resident. The high-speed railway debt alone is $1 trillion and continues to grow. Empty apartments worth trillions of dollars that don't generate any income. The debt of local authorities is $9 trillion, hidden from official statistics. For comparison, the entire United States national debt is $33 trillion. China's debt is almost twice as large, even though the country's economy is still smaller than America's. But here's what is the most frightening of all. Chinese banks are now so vulnerable that the government had to inject $68 billion just to keep them afloat in 2025. This is a desperate attempt to prevent a financial crisis, not a show of strength.
That means those who supplied China with natural resources will no longer be able to sell them, and investors in China will not be able to get their money back. And developing countries to which China lent a lot of money and started building all sorts of roads, power plants, ports, and airfields, also on credit, will not be able to finish them and will not be able to pay off their debts. But right now our focus is on Russia. If Kitai halves its oil purchases from Russia and India accepts the United States offer and takes the suppliers we bring to it, this will cause the collapse of the Russian economy. We've said it many times already, it's standing, as they say, on one leg, on the resources it exports. Russia used to supply weapons, but now it needs those weapons for itself. It seems that in Moscow, they've started to realize they've bet on a lame horse. And while Trump is ready, for the sake of peace in Ukraine, to lift sanctions from Russia, recognize Crimea, and apparently even de facto agree to the temporary occupation of Russia by Russia, what Ukraine has already lost, what is already occupied in Ukraine by Russian troops. So, I think they decided at the very least not to miss this chance. Maybe they're trying to play both sides. They still hope that the United States will return Russia to the world of those who are accepted, which in fact the Ukrainians simply cannot tolerate morally. But that's Ukraine's decision. But to accept Putin's impunity in exchange for the lives of thousands of young people, young Ukrainians, I don't know if the people of Ukraine can choose the lives of their children in exchange for the enemy's impunity. I'm afraid they can't. Well, you're probably already asking yourself, where's the cherry on top? The cherry, where is it? Here it is.
New inflation data has come out. This is the main inflation indicator that the Federal Reserve focuses on. And on this front, we actually have some really good news. Over the month, prices rose just a little, only by 0.01%. Year over year, that's 2.1%. This is the lowest figure in 7 months, and it's the level the Federal Reserve wants to see. Usually they aim for 2%, and right now we're just a bit above that level. Usually I think the Federal Reserve would have noted this, but I don't think they will today, because of course there's still a lot ahead, especially tariffs. And many economists believe that this is still the calm before the storm, and eventually we will see price increases caused by tariffs. This isn't fully visible, but that's expected. Also in this array,
the new trade deficit figures published this morning are also in this data array. And just listen, that very same infamous trillion-dollar trade deficit that Trump is so eager to fix was cut in half last month. You can't make this up. This is the largest reduction in the trade deficit in a single month in the entire history of record-keeping, and it's all thanks to Trump's tariff policy.
Look, the latest figure, of course, is very important for this administration. This is the trade balance, which was expected to have a deficit of minus $143 billion, but the actual figure turned out to be much, much lower, minus $87 billion. And now this follows the figure of 163, which was revised to 160 billion with a deficit. The worst result since statistics began to be recorded in 1989. And then we reduced it by half to 87.6. This will be the lowest figure, and I really need to go back, but 87.6 is the lowest level. Since September 2023, yes, since September 2023. And this really highlights how much the movement of goods and services has changed due to various issues related to tariffs.
So why? How did this happen after decades of living with a trade deficit of more than $2 trillion a year? How did they manage to cut it in half in just 1 month? After Liberation Day on April 5th, 1985, our largest trading
partners began
negotiations with Trump's trade team, many of them, but not all. But many agreed to temporarily lower their tariffs on American goods to zero as a sign of good faith negotiations. Again, not all, but only some of them, countries like Canada and the European Union, which are considered our closest allies.
It's already clear, so I probably don't need to explain it, but I can't help feeling pleased and, well, gloating a little. Go and take a look at the podcasts of all Russian-speaking channels, at interviews with so-called experts and empty talkers from my own circle. Those who predicted inflation for us, but it actually decreased to pre-coronavirus disease 2019 levels under Trump. They predicted production stoppages, skyrocketing shortages, and that the country's debts would quadruple. But where is all of that? Where is all of it? Debts are falling, incomes are rising, and inflation is going down. Now investments in high tech will begin, and there, where factories will be built. In the states where there are no so-called mandatory unions. So we have such a concept that is the right of anyone to work. Yeah, you have to pass a right-to-work law in America, otherwise the union will strangle you. So there are Republican states that have passed this law. So there will be an economic boom there, like a gold rush in Kalandaka. And in the Oval Office, Trump is listening to economic news together with journalists.
Personal incomes grew by 0.8%. That's almost 3 times more than expected. So what are the actual income figures for the first 4 months of the year? They are simply staggering. They are truly outstanding. I mean, I could go back and look at the first 4 months of many different years, really very strong numbers. And you're right, this is the administration. They're literally criticized for everything possible. I've never in my life seen an administration's policy be as transparent as this one, where you could look inside like that. But why shouldn't we, give credit where it's due? I agree, revenues are really rising sharply.
Gentlemen, that was it. No more, no less. I said, as an analyst, I have never seen anything in my life like what President Trump and his administration are doing. For myself, ladies and gentlemen, I will add that I have lived outside the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and have been following politics for more than 50 years. In fact, 52 years, to be precise. And nothing like this. But under no president, not even under Nonu Darajin, have I seen anything like what is happening in the United States of America today. So it turns out the dogs bark, but the caravan moves on. And it moves on, thank God. It's a pity that part of the Russian-speaking creative intelligentsia turned out to be these so-called dogs. But usually, by the way, the creative intelligentsia is usually rather foolish. Having a voice and throat from God doesn't necessarily mean having intelligence from God. By the way, physicists and mathematicians are often such idiots in real life that you just don't know whether to laugh or cry. And by the way, that's exactly what they're called. Partial or portioned intellectuals. I know it exactly in English, but I've never translated it into Russian. I hope partial intellectuals, physicists, and geographers, they really proceed from facts and logic, which is what makes them intellectuals. Not just well-read, but intellectuals. They are usually well-read in their own field as well. But in social life, if some old lady said something, then he just repeats it. Well, some old lady said it. Just gossip. That's what it used to be called in my day. Or like some guy I know just made it up. And all the other guys started nodding their heads, some with beards, some without, and mooing approvingly, hiccuping from the warm vodka. I dislike these half or quarter intellectuals more than anyone else. The rabble is just simple. He burped, drank his beer, blew off the foam, scratched his balls, told the whole world idiots, burped again, and went to sleep. And these people think they're the upper caste, not even realizing how ridiculous they are. They're always hanging out in their own little narrow circle. That's why nobody, as they say, makes fun of them. Or something like that in Russian I don't remember anymore. Generally, no one laughs at them. They simply nod at each other. And they confirm how intellectual they are and how those who aren't present right now are not. So that's what their little get-together is about, and are they really that intellectual? I think that most physicists and mathematicians can't even imagine it, and doctors, by the way, and engineers, and I don't even want to mention teachers. I didn't say that, I just thought it to myself and kept quiet about it. They don't even know what it means to think. They don't know what it means to think. They think, they calculate. Thinking is such a concept that we constantly use in life without really meaning anything by it, in reality. Like when we say freedom, freedom. But what is freedom? No one really understands, or rather everyone understands it in their own way. And that's why Muhammad fights for freedom, and Ayn Rand fought for freedom. Do you think it's for the same thing or for different things? In general, these are the ones who are intellectuals. They know how to read, remember, and then quickly recall it. And they think that this is what it means to think. It's not my responsibility to properly educate them. That's it. Well, there are likes and subscriptions. If you're interested in additional information, please become sponsors. From $4 a month to any amount you want. Goodbye.